Okay, today I'd like to invite you to turn with me in your Bibles to Luke chapter 10. We're going to be reading a really famous passage of Scripture, Luke chapter 10, verses 25 through 37. These verses contain what's probably one of the most famous teachings of Jesus. It's a parable that he told called the parable of the Good Samaritan. Even if you haven't been to church before, or maybe have never really even cracked open a Bible, I think it's likely that you've heard this parable before, or at least the term Good Samaritan. It's really become, I think, very, very popular, both for Christians and non-Christians. We're going to read these words. We're going to think a lot about what Jesus meant by them. I'm going to start reading in verse 25 and read through verse 37. I really always encourage people to have a Bible in front of you. And if you didn't bring your own Bible or you don't have a Bible on your cell phone, there's Bibles in the chairs around you. You can take one out. You can find the passage we're going to be looking at on page 1615. And that way you'll be able to follow along as we proceed. And anyway, I'm going to start reading at verse 25. Here we read this. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What's written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" And he answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind. And love your neighbor as yourself." "You've answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this, and you'll live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was. When he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper. 'Look after him,' he said, 'and when I return, I'll reimburse you for any extra expense you may have.' Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?" The expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him." And Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise." Like I said, parable of the Good Samaritan, probably one of the most famous parables or teaching of Jesus. And what's interesting about this teaching is that it's set up by a dialogue between Jesus and a person who's called an expert in the law. And in Jesus' day, a lot of people really studying, they made the foundation of their life and just built everything around the law of God, which you find in the Old Testament. And this was a person who was an expert in the law. And you can see that he has this adversarial relationship with Jesus. Because it says in verse 25 that on one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to, and you see the word, test Jesus. In other words, he kind of had this assumption or had figured out that Jesus, something's not quite right with this guy. He doesn't live up to the law the way we want him to live up to the law. There's some flaw in him, and he thinks he's going to find it out. So he asks this question, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And I'm sure what this teacher of the law was thinking Jesus' response would be. And here's the reason he has this adversarial relationship with Jesus. Jesus was a person who did things like this. He sat, talked with, and ate with sinners, quote unquote, tax collectors, prostitutes. He embraced people who were on the margins of society. He was always going after Gentiles who really didn't belong to God's people. And probably in this teacher of the law's mind, he just disregarded the holiness and the righteousness and the goodness that God wants and requires in his law. And so he's probably thinking to himself when he asked Jesus, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" that Jesus is going to say something like, "Now listen. God loves us all, and he embraces us all, and so don't worry so much about the law because God's there to wrap his arms around you." And that is not how Jesus answered. In fact, he responds with a question. He says, now listen, what's written in the law? And he asks a follow-up question. How do you read it? In other words, as you read through the law, as you've come to understand all its demands, and keep in mind, this was an expert in the law. He had spent years and years studying and poring over and trying to put together what it was the law required. He says, okay, summarize it for me. What do you see in there? What's it requiring of you? And the man's answer, I think we'll all agree when we finish, is a great answer. In fact, Jesus affirms the answer and says, you've answered correctly. This is what he says. He says, here it is. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. A couple of thoughts about this answer. First of all, Jesus agrees with him. In fact, at one point, someone asked Jesus, hey, Jesus, summarize the law. And Jesus spoke these exact words. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus certainly agrees that this man has it right. If you were to study the 10 Commandments in the Old Testament, you'll find that there's 2 tables of the law. The first 4 commandments all have to do with our love for God. The last 6 commandments all have to do with our love for neighbor. And as this man tells the answer, he's nailed it. He's hit it on the head. And I can even say this, even if you've never read the 10 Commandments or thought about them, I am willing to guess that almost everyone in this room agrees that this is what's needed in the world. At least not with the first one, maybe not as much, but definitely by the time we get to the second, there won't be a person in here, Christian, non-Christian, religious, non-religious, who will disagree that this is what the world needs. So, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind. Whether you're a Christian or not, I'm sure, let's just do a thought experiment. If there was a God, maybe you think there's not, but just suppose there was. Maybe you don't know how we got here, or you think it's some scientific process, but just suppose that there was a God who actually created us, who created everything around us, who gave us our personality and our families and the air we breathe every single day. If there was such a God, I think you'd agree with me that treating him like a vending machine, like when I need something, I'll go to him, that's not right. Treating that God, if there was a God who created us, treating him with indifference, which, by the way, is really close to hate, that wouldn't be right. It'd only be equitable. It'd only be fair. If there's a God who supplies all our need and keeps us alive and gave us our soul and gives us our bodies and, looks after us, it'd only be right or fair or equitable. Wouldn't you agree? For us to love that God with all of our soul, all our strength, all our might, in whatever way we could express that love. If there were such a God, I think you'd agree with me that that'd be the only right thing to do. Now, the second one, I think you'll agree with even more. Love your neighbor as yourself. I think if I said, now listen, this is the key to this is what our broken world needs. Almost everyone here would agree that's exactly what our broken world needs. I could talk in large scale about the wars, the atrocities, the things we see on TV, just kind of the big things. The hate and the anger and everything we see on TV and around the world. If people just loved, I think we'd all agree, it'd be better. It'd be much better in this world. But let's just on a small scale, because I think everyone here agrees that this is the thing. Suppose there were 5 people, and you were one of them. They all lived together in the same house. This is an easy thought experiment for me, because my immediate family is 5 people. And 2 scenarios. Scenario number 1, every one of these 5 who lived in the same home, they were all out for themselves. They were totally selfish and self-oriented. Every time there was an opportunity, they took for themselves. They never had a regard for the other person. If every person who was living in a house was like this, when there was a door to be opened, they always waited and stepped back so that someone else would be forced to open the door for them. And if every time there was a dish to be picked up, you always try to force the other person to do it. No, it's your turn. No, it's your turn. And I don't have to do it. And if everyone in the house was totally selfish and self-oriented, that'd be a terrible way to live, wouldn't it? On the other hand, suppose 5 people lived in a house, and all 5 people put the other 4 in front of themselves. Whenever there was a door to be opened, they would all rush, let me do that for you. Whenever there was a dish to be picked up, whenever there was anything to be done, they were always showing care and concern. When one was down, the other four would do everything they could to pick that person up. I mean, which of those two houses would you prefer to live in? The one of selfishness and self-orientation? Or it's obvious, right? We realize the answers to the problem of the world is this: love. And if people would just love God and love each other, I mean, this world we live in with all its troubles and frustrations, we get it. Jesus says to him, you've answered correctly. He's right. And we all agree. And so Jesus says, do this, and you'll live. And now, this man, I think he does just what all of us would do at this moment. He senses. You know, he started out one way thinking Jesus was going to talk about, just embracing and everything's okay. And now he's talked about the law. And Jesus says, okay, that's what you need to do. Just do that. Love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Love your neighbor in the same way. And you'll have it. And, okay, hold on a second. All of us, I saw you were shaking your head. That would be so much better. And some of us, you live in a house with 5 people. Are you like that? Do you do that? Does our world do it? We all nod our head. Yes, that's right. Man, that is what we need. Amen, that's great. But, okay, then why aren't you? Why isn't your home like that? Why isn't your heart like that? And, in other words, the law tells us what we need to do, but does it give us the power to do it? And because this man senses, okay, I get it, right? If I did that, God would accept me, but I'm not. He does what I think most of us do. He tries to hedge himself, and actually, in verse 29, it says this: he wanted to justify himself. So we asked Jesus this question: who is my neighbor? And at the heart of the question, I think it's actually something that we all do. We're now asking, and he's asking Jesus, what is the minimum thing I need to do to be accepted? In other words, I get it, love God, but what's sort of the minimum requirement here? And I think that all the time when we hear this, we need to love God fully, we need to love our neighbor fully. We in several different ways might limit what that means. One of the ways you do that is by asking the question, who? Who should I love? And that's what this person does. He says, who's my neighbor? Okay, I should love my neighbor. Who's my neighbor? And this is what we'd like to do. We'd like to say to ourselves, okay, the people who are close with me, the people who are like me, the people who I identify with and get along with, that's what you mean, right, Jesus? I mean, surely you can't mean like enemies and horrible people. I mean, just the people in my family and friends and the people who are like me, right? And interestingly enough, Jesus is going to say wrong. In fact, he's just about now to tell a story about the two main characters are a Jew and a Samaritan. And you may or may not know this, that in the time of Jesus, the Jews and Samaritans were mortal enemies. They hated each other. It started way back when, some of you, as we went through the Bible, you'll remember this, in the time of Solomon, right after his reign, the kingdom of Israel got divided north and south. The northern capital city was a city called Samaria. That's where we get the term Samaritan. The southern kingdom's capital was Jerusalem. And they began to be like enemies and rivals. As time progressed, here's what happened. Foreign armies came and attacked and invaded both places. Eventually, the northern kingdom was carried away. The southern kingdom was carried away. When the Jews of the southern kingdom returned to Jerusalem, and they returned from a nation called Babylon to rebuild the city walls and rebuild the temple, it was the Samaritans who were writing letters to officials trying to get it to stop. It was they who came to mock the Jews, to make fun of them, to say, what are you doing? Ha, 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 you'll never rebuild the wall. There was an animosity built up between these two groups. It had built so much, and historians record this in the time of Jesus, during Jesus' life actually. Samaritans snuck into the temple, and they scattered human bones throughout the temple. Now, you just have to imagine this. I mean, those of us who are members of this church, we love this place. If someone were to sneak in the middle of the night and scatter human remains throughout our sanctuary, how would we feel about that person? I mean, there'd be like right? We don't think anything. I mean, we don't love this place anywhere close to the way the Jews loved the temple. The Jews and Samaritans were mortal enemies. And we're going to read a story that Jesus said, no, look, you can't. It's not just your friends. It's not just your close family, the people who are close to you. It's everyone. Another way we try to limit how much we love is we say, well, when? When do I have to love? And most of us would say, okay, when there's somebody who really falls on hard times, I mean, their house is destroyed by natural disaster, or they're struck with a sickness that's not their fault. Yeah, then I get it. My heart goes out to them, and then I'll help, and then I'll love. But, how about those people who brought it on themselves? Do I really have to self-sacrificially love them too? Is that another time? And, of course, Jesus is going to tell a story where you go to the very end of yourself. It doesn't just matter whether this person is someone you love or someone who's done it to themselves. You do whatever, whenever. Another question that we sometimes ask ourselves in order to limit what God requires, we'll say, well, how much? Not just who, not just when, but how much? How far do I have to go? Like, I get it. Like, if I can help, I will. And Jesus is about to tell a story where, listen, it's not just a little. You go all the way, even when you risk your life, even when it costs you something. And anyway, let's dive into the story. Here's the question. We all know love's the answer. We all got it. How are we going to be empowered to do it? And there's historically two different answers. I'll give you the first answer, then we're going to read the story. Answer number one, because the law says so. And by the way, almost every religion in the world takes this approach. This is what you need to do. Here's the prescription. Here's the things you shouldn't do. Here's the way you should live. And almost every religion in the world, it does this. It makes us feel guilty. You're not doing enough. Love more. And we start saying, wow, I don't measure up. I guess I got to pull myself up. I got to do more. And almost every religion works that way. It just repeats the law to you and says, now get at it, and if you're not doing it, you're guilty. How dare you? Shame on you. Jesus has another approach. He tells this story. He says there's a man who was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. And the story, by the way, although it's a story that Jesus probably makes up, it's got a real-life character to it. The road from Jerusalem to Jericho is a road that almost every person at one point in their life, if they lived in the nation of Israel, would have traveled. It's an incredibly dangerous road. This verse speaks about being attacked by robbers. The descent that was made on this narrow road was very treacherous. And in fact, in Jesus' day, part of the road or part of the path was called the Bloody Pass, because it was very common that you were vulnerable, you were out in the wilderness, that robbers would take advantage of you. And you would have known as you walked on this road, you would have felt the anxiety had you gone there before. This kind of thing could happen to anybody. And so Jesus, he kind of plucks from what could happen in real life. He says there's this man going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. What's interesting about this setup here is we know almost nothing about this man. And by the time Jesus is done describing what happened to him, we know even less about him. And here's why. We're not told what his nationality is. We're not told, was he a rich man or a poor man? We're not told about his background. We know nothing about him. It's just he's a man. He's traveling. And here's what happens to him. Both he's stripped of his clothes and he's lying there on the ground fading out. Why I say we know less about him. In Jesus' day, if you were to walk up to someone, there are two ways in which you could tell things about that person almost immediately. Number one, their accent or language. We often don't think about this, but in Jesus' day, there was all kinds of people speaking all kinds of languages: Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, a whole host of other ancient Near Eastern languages. And you could pretty much figure out what tribe or background this person was come from when you walked up and you just passed each other and you said hello. You'd immediately, as they spoke, know something about who they were. That'd be one identifying feature. Another identifying feature, and it still is this way to us is the clothing that a person wore. I mean, even today, we know if someone's a professional, if they're a worker, if they're wearing a uniform, where they work, what kind of person they are. We generally, by the uniform or clothes they're wearing, kind of size up how much money they make. We know whether they're a safe person or a dangerous person. We do this all the time, and both those identifying things, the language, because he's fading away and half dead, and the clothing, he's been stripped away. He's just a nondescript man lying there half dead. We know almost nothing about him. Verse 31 says this: a priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. This is really interesting. Both the priest and the Levite were people who were steeped in the law. And they were steeped in the law, and not only that, they were religious workers. They helped poor people for a living. The priest and the Levite, they were the ones to whom alms were given so that they could distribute it to those who were in need. They helped people for a living. They had the law, they did it for a living, and interestingly enough, as they see this man, that law which they'd been given, which they knew, which they founded their life on, that they practiced for a living, was not enough to move them to help. And there's probably some reasons why, reasons that I think we'd all understand. Okay, he's lying there, not dead, but half dead, which means he hasn't been lying there a long time. Who was it that got to him? Robbers who camped out on the road. If I stop, those robbers are still somewhere nearby. If I stoop down to help him, what if I just put myself in danger, right? The same people who did this to this half-dead man could do it to me. Not only that, but I mean, it's interesting what happens here. The priest, in Jesus' day, the priests were all very rich. He's probably riding on a donkey or some other animal. He probably had the resources to do something. The Levite also, but the priest even more. They were able, but they would not. Although they had the law, although they did it for a living, when it came to just, there they are, there's a dead man by the side of the road, they passed by on the other side. Verse 33, but a Samaritan. And as I say that word, I mean, you've got to have all the categories of like adversary, enemy, hated person. As he traveled, came where the man was. When he saw him, he took pity on him. That word pity means that he was moved in his guts. It was like a heart-wrenching thing, like, oh, how could this happen to a person? And it says in verse 34, he went to him. He bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I'll reimburse you for any extra expense you have. You got to understand what an extremely compassionate and loving thing this man did. He too was in great danger. I mean, the robbers, they're around here somewhere, and if I stop, I might fall into their hands. He risked it all. And what he did came at a cost. When he bandaged the man, he took them, he put him on his own donkey, which would have slowed down his travel. He then brought them to an inn. Now listen, if you're a Samaritan, and again, the categories have to go through your mind: enemy, adversary, hated person. You're a Samaritan, you roll into a Jewish town, and on your donkey behind you is a half-dead Jew. Who do you think the finger is going to be pointed at? I mean, all eyes on him. I mean, he's putting his life in danger. And when he gets to the end, guess what? This man who's been robbed, who's been beaten to half dead, he has nothing. And so he pulls out his billfold. He doesn't only pay cash, he takes out his credit card. I mean, not only does he give the innkeeper 2 denarii, but he says to him, look after him. When I return, I will personally pay and reimburse you for any expense you have. Like, hey, at my cost. I mean, it's sacrificial, it's costly to this man. And this man restores this half-dead, beaten and robbed man back to life. It's an extremely moving story of love. Now, so that you understand this story and how it worked and how this teacher in the law, this expert in the law, would have heard it, you have to hear the story that Jesus did not tell. He did not say, suppose a Samaritan was traveling from Jericho to Jerusalem when robbers fell on him and he was beaten and robbed and got left half dead. And a priest stopped by and a Levite stopped by and finally a Jewish man came by. And that Jewish man had compassion on him and healed his wounds and took care of him and brought him to an inn and restored the man back to health. Had that been the story Jesus told, the expert in the law, he would have responded one of two ways. The first way he might have responded and he said, I knew it, Jesus. You're full of baloney. We should have kicked that guy and left him for dead, that filthy Samaritan. You're all wrong, Jesus. And he would have walked away with disgust. That's one way he could have responded. Or, as Jesus finished talking, he might have said, wow, I see now. The law demands far more than I thought. I thought I should just love the people who are close to me. But now I see the law demands that I love people even who are my enemies. And he would have said to himself, I guess I better try harder. I feel guilty now. I should work more at it. That is not the story Jesus told. Let's hear the story one more time. A man. And we don't know anything about him, but here's the way parables work. At some point or another, actually, Jesus tells stories so that you begin to identify with the characters in it. There's just this man, and almost certainly because he's going from Jerusalem, he's a what kind of man? He's a Jewish man. He's traveling a road that all Jews travel. He gets beat up, he gets robbed, he gets left half dead. Anyone who overheard the story said, well, that could happen to me. I've felt the anxiety walking that road before. That could be me. And while, Jesus could have said, you were walking the road. And you were left half dead. And a priest came by and did nothing. A Levite came by and did nothing. And you're lying there and you're fading out. Wouldn't you be wanting something? Someone, anyone to help you. And believe it or not, a Samaritan, your enemy, came and he had mercy and pity on you. And he bandaged you up and he saved you. That's how this man would have he would have identified with the character who's lying there half dead. Now, I want to suggest to you that that kind of thing can move your heart. That kind of thing can motivate you. And if you haven't heard it already or figured it out already, let me be even more clear. This story is ultimately a story of what God has done for us. You know the story, right? God created us, he loved us, he made us in his own image. But how do we treat him? With indifference, with hate? I mean, for the most part, the story of humanity is us trying to get God's clammy hands off us, like, stay away from us, God. The story of Jesus, John says this, Jesus came to that which was his own, but the world did not receive him. What did we want to do with Jesus? Get rid of him, kill him, go away, we don't want you. I mean, we treat God like an enemy. And although that's the case when we were lost, when we were in darkness, when we were half dead, God was moved with compassion and pity. And he showed up in the person of Jesus Christ to save us, to heal us, to restore us. That's the story of the gospel. How Jesus came so that God could take our sin and put it on Jesus. He could be punished instead of us so that we could be restored to new life. Don't you see it? You've got to realize when Jesus tells the story, we're the ones lying on the road. And somebody, not motivated by law but love, showed up and saved us. Now, let me tell you something. If you found yourself drowning in the ocean, and as you were struggling and finally giving in to the winds and the waves, and you had water coming in your mouth and you're just about to give up and you're sinking, someone reached in and grabbed you out. Wouldn't You be moved now by compassion to see when other people are in the trouble to do the same. Don't you realize we were half dead? We were dying, and someone came and grabbed us and pulled us out and saved us. And this is Jesus' point to this expert of the law. Listen, what could move us to love God and love one another with the kind of force that's described by the law of God? And it's not the law. The law can tell you what you ought to do. The law could make you feel guilty about not doing it. But the law gives you no power to actually fulfill what it wants. It's only when you're moved every day by the cross of Jesus, by the fact that I was lost and he rescued me, that you'll start to live this way, in a way that'll change the world, in a way that'll start fixing the problems and make all the difference. Which is why every single day of our life, we just have to rehearse this truth. I was a dead man lying on the road, left for no one when God showed up. I was lost, and now I'm found. I was in darkness. I couldn't see, and the light of God shone into my life. We just rehearse this again and again and again.